The Staircase in the Woods. My name is David. I spent the better part of the 1990s working for the National Park Service as a search and rescue SAR officer in the Pacific Northwest. People think my job was like the movies, heroic rescues, helicopters, and tracking footprints in the mud. And for the most part, it was. But there's a reason why old-timers in the SAR community don't talk about certain things. There's a reason why. After 10 years of service, I handed in my badge and moved to a city where the only trees are planted in concrete boxes. I was stationed in a remote sector of the Olympic National Park. It's a place of breathtaking beauty, but it's also a place of impossible density. The ferns grow as tall as a man, and the moss blankets everything in a heavy, suffocating green. You can be 10 feet off the trail and be completely invisible to the world. In 1994, we were looking for a 5-year-old boy named Toby. He had vanished while his parents were setting up camp near the Hoh River. No tracks, no scent for the dogs, nothing. We had been sweeping the area for 3 days. I was assigned to a high-altitude sector, about 15 miles away from the last known sighting, an area so rugged that no 5-year-old could have reached it on foot. I was pushing through a dense thicket of old-growth cedar when I broke into a clearing that wasn't on any of our topographical maps. The clearing was a perfect circle, about 30 feet across. The grass inside was vibrant, unnaturally short, as if it were being meticulously mown every day. But that wasn't what made me stop in my tracks. In the exact center of the clearing stood a staircase. It wasn't attached to a house. It didn't lead to a porch or a second floor. It was just a freestanding set of stairs made of pristine white marble. It looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel in Seattle, not in the middle of a primary forest 15 miles from the nearest road. There were 12 steps, carved with intricate floral patterns along the sides, and a polished mahogany banister that caught the filtered sunlight with a dull, oily glow. "Dispatch, this is Ranger 4 Charlie," I whispered into my radio, my eyes never leaving the marble. "Go ahead, 4 Charlie," the voice crackled back. "I've found a structural anomaly. High altitude sector 7B. It's a staircase, freestanding, looks brand new." There was a long pause on the other end. Longer than usual. When the voice came back, it was no longer the dispatcher. It was my supervisor, Chief Miller. His voice was low, devoid of its usual gruffness. "4 Charlie, listen to me carefully. Do not approach the structure. Do not photograph it. And for the love of God, do not step on it." "Chief, it's just a set of stairs. Maybe some eccentric hiker." "It is not a set of stairs, David," Miller interrupted, his voice trembling. "Mark the coordinates in your head, turn around, and continue the search for the boy. If you see it again, you move in the opposite direction. Do you understand?" I looked back at the staircase. I was a man of logic, of structures, of things that could be measured. And yet, looking at that marble, I felt a deep, primal sense of wrongness. The shadows around the base of the stairs didn't match the angle of the sun. They were too long, too dark, and they seemed to be pulsing ever so slightly, like a slow, heavy breath. I started to turn away, just as the chief had ordered. But then I heard it. From the top of the stairs, the 12th step that led to nothing but empty air, I heard the sound of a child giggling. "Toby?" I called out, my heart leaping into my throat. The giggling came again, followed by the soft tap, tap, tap of small feet on marble. I shined my light toward the top of the structure. There was no one there. But on the third step from the top, a small red plastic fire truck, Toby's favorite toy, according to the briefing, was sitting perfectly still, its wheels spinning slowly as if it had just been placed there. I stood at the edge of that perfect circle of grass, my boots heavy with the mud of the Ho River, but my mind was spinning faster than the wheels on that little red fire truck. Toby's toy. It was right there. Logically, if the toy was on the third step, Toby had to be nearby. But logic doesn't survive long in the deep woods of the Olympics. Chief, I've got a visual on the subject's toy, I said into the radio, my voice strained. It's on the structure. I'm going in to retrieve it. There might be a trail. 4 Charlie, stay where you are. That is a direct order. Miller's voice was almost a scream now, distorted by the interference of the trees. The toy isn't real, David. It's bait. Get out of there. The radio cut into a sharp, high-pitched whine and then went dead. Not just static, but a complete silence, as if the battery had been sucked dry in an instant. I looked back at the stairs. The giggling had stopped. Now, there was only the whisper of the wind through the cedar branches, but even that sounded different here. In this clearing, the wind didn't move the grass. The air was dead, cold, and smelled faintly of ozone and old, dry paper. I took my first step into the circle. The moment my boot touched that unnaturally short grass, the forest behind me seemed to recede. The tall ferns and the thick moss didn't disappear, but they became blurred, like a photograph out of focus. The only thing that remained sharp, painfully clear, was the white marble of the staircase. I approached the base of the steps. Up close, the marble wasn't just white. It was translucent. I could see faint swirling patterns deep inside the stone, moving like slow-motion galaxies. And the smell changed again. It wasn't ozone anymore. It was the scent of a hospital, sterile, sharp, and smelling of floor wax. Toby, it's Ranger David. I have your truck. Come out, buddy. We're going home. I reached out my hand to grab the fire truck from the third step. But as my fingers crossed the invisible line where the staircase began, the air began to vibrate. It was a low-frequency hum that I felt in my teeth, in my marrow. I didn't step on the first stair. Not yet. I just reached for the toy. But the toy moved. As my fingers were inches away, the little red truck slid up to the 4th step, then the 5th. It didn't roll. It was as if the marble itself was shifting, carrying the object upward toward the empty space at the top. Stop, I whispered. I looked up at the top of the stairs. The 12th step led to nothing. Just a patch of gray sky visible through the canopy. But as I watched, the air above the top step began to shimmer, like heat rising off a highway in July. For a split second, I didn't see the sky. I saw a room. A clean, white room with a single window looking out over a city I didn't recognize, a city with spires that were too tall and lights that were too bright. And in that room, I saw the back of a small boy's head. Toby, I forgot Miller's warning. I forgot the rules of the SAR. I forgot everything except the need to reach that child. I placed my right boot on the first step. The marble felt like ice. But more than that, it felt hungry. The moment my weight hit the stone, I felt a sudden, violent tug in my chest, as if my very soul was being yanked toward the top. The hum in the air turned into a roar, a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, thousands of them, whispering names, dates, and coordinates. I took the second step. The world around me vanished. The forest was gone. The clearing was gone. I was standing on a white staircase in a void of pure, blinding light. There was no up and no down. There was only the vertical line of the marble and the overwhelming urge to reach the top. I took the third step. The air grew thin. My lungs burned as if I were standing on the summit of Everest. I reached for the banister, but the mahogany felt like human skin, warm, yielding, and pulsing with a slow, heavy heartbeat. I looked down at my hands and saw that they were becoming pale, almost as translucent as the marble itself. Don't. Stop. David. The voice didn't come from the top. It came from the step I was standing on. The boy is almost home. You just need to finish the climb. It was my own voice, but it sounded like it was coming from a version of me that had already reached the top years ago. My fourth step felt like wading through liquid lead. Every inch I climbed, the gravity of the world I knew, the world of trees, of rain, and of SAR protocols seemed to peel away from me. I wasn't just climbing stairs, I was climbing out of reality. I looked down, expecting to see the forest floor or the clearing. Instead, there was only a swirling gray mist that looked like static on an old television screen. The clearing had been a portal, and the staircase was the bridge. I could feel the individual cells in my body vibrating, trying to pull apart, trying to align themselves with the cold, perfect geometry of the marble. "Toby!" I shouted again. My voice didn't sound like a man's anymore. It sounded like a chime, a metallic resonance that echoed through the white void. The boy, or the thing that looked like Toby, finally turned around. He was standing on the 10th step. He was holding the red fire truck, but his fingers were fused to the plastic. His face, it wasn't a child's face anymore. It was smooth, like the marble beneath his feet. He had no eyes, no nose, only a faint horizontal line where a mouth should be. "David, look at the view," the boy said. The words didn't come from his mouth. They vibrated directly into my skull. I looked past him, toward the 12th step. The shimmering window I had seen earlier was wider now. It wasn't just a room. It was a doorway into a place that felt like a nightmare designed by an architect from another dimension. I saw white towers that reached into a violet sky, and thousands of these staircases, all floating in the air, each with a single pale figure standing on the top step, staring out into the nothingness. I took the 5th step, then the 6th. With every step, I felt my memories being compressed. I forgot the name of the town I grew up in. I forgot the smell of cedar after a rainstorm. I forgot the weight of my badge. I was becoming light. I was becoming part of the structure. Then I heard a sound that didn't belong in this white void. It was the sound of a radio. Not a clear voice, but a burst of static and the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of an emergency locator transmitter. 4, Charlie, come in. David, do not reach the 10th. Chief Miller's voice was faint, coming from somewhere far below, beneath the gray mist. It was a tether, a jagged, ugly, human sound that cut through the perfect, humming silence of the stairs. I looked at my hand on the mahogany banister. It was no longer pale. It was starting to turn gray, the skin taking on the texture of polished wood. I looked at the boy on the 10th step. He was reaching out his hand toward me, beckoning me to join him in the violet sky. Just 3 more. David. Then the wait stops. Then the wait. Silence begins. I felt a sudden, violent surge of anger, not fear, but a raw human rage at the coldness of this thing. This wasn't a rescue. This was a harvest. The forest wasn't hungry. It was a filter. And the staircases were the collection points for the things that fell through the cracks. I reached for my belt. My gear was mostly gone, dissolved into the white light, but my heavy, iron-bound SAR radio was still there, hanging by a leather strap. It was the only real thing I had left. It was heavy, it was battered, and it was filled with the voices of men who spent their lives fighting the dark. I didn't take another step up. Instead, I raised the radio and slammed it down onto the marble of the 7th step. Crack. The sound was like a thunderclap in a library. A jagged black fissure erupted from the point of impact, tearing across the pristine white stone. The hum in the air turned into a shriek of feedback. The white void flickered, and for a second, I saw the green needles of the cedar trees through the mist. No! The boy screamed, his voice turning into a mechanical grind. The circle must be closed. The staircase began to shake. The marble beneath my feet started to liquefy, turning into a cold, white slush. I felt myself slipping, my boots losing their grip on the 7th step. I looked up at Toby, the thing that was Toby, and I saw the window at the top step beginning to shrink. I realized then that the stairs didn't just lead to another place. They fed on the climb. Every step I took gave the structure the energy to manifest in our world. If I reached the top, the bridge would be permanent. If I stayed, the clearing would never close. I reached out and grabbed the red fire truck from the boy's hand. The plastic felt hot, searing my palm. As I pulled it away, the boy's face shattered like glass. I didn't climb down, I jumped. I threw myself off the side of the 7th step into the gray mist, clutching the red fire truck to my chest. Falling from the 7th step didn't feel like falling through air. It felt like falling through time, a sickening, visceral deceleration that pulled at my skin and made my vision blur into streaks of green and gray. I expected to hit the ground with bone-shattering force, but instead, I hit the soft, mossy earth of the Ho River Basin with a dull, wet thud. The transition was violent. 1 second, I was in a void of blinding white light. The next, I was back in the suffocating humid green of the Olympic National Park. The silence of the stairs was replaced by the deafening roar of the forest, the wind in the cedars, the distant rush of the river, and the frantic, distorted crackle of my radio lying a few feet away. I lay there, gasping for air that finally felt real, my lungs burning with the scent of damp earth and rot. My hand was still clenched tight, my knuckles white and aching. I looked down and saw it. The red fire truck. It was there, but it was ruined. The plastic was melted and blackened, as if it had been held in a furnace. For Charlie! David! Answer me! Miller's voice on the radio was clear now. No more humming. No more whispers. I'm here, Chief. I rasped into the mic. My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone much older. I'm in the clearing. The anomaly is gone. I looked toward the center of the clearing. The circle of perfectly mown grass was still there, but the white marble staircase had vanished. There was no trace of it, no rubble, no dust, no sign that a 12-step structure had ever existed. But in the exact spot where the first step had been, there was a rectangular patch of dead, scorched earth, where nothing, not even the moss, would grow. I never found Toby. The search was called off 2 days later. The official report said he likely fell into a crevice or was taken by a predator. I was put on mandatory leave for operational exhaustion. They said the things I saw were hallucinations caused by dehydration and the high altitude conditions. But they couldn't explain the red fire truck in my evidence bag, the toy that Toby's parents confirmed had been in his pocket when he disappeared. I left the service a month after that. I didn't say goodbye to Miller. I didn't want to see the look in his eyes, the look of a man who knew exactly what I'd seen and was terrified that I might ask him about the ones he'd found. I live in an apartment now, on the 14th floor of a concrete high-rise. There are no trees here, no moss, just glass, steel, and the steady, artificial hum of the city. But the stairs, they didn't stay in the woods. Every time I have to take the stairs in this building when the elevator is out or the power flickers, I feel it. I'll be on the 3rd landing or the 7th, and the air will suddenly grow thin. The scent of floor wax and ozone will drift through the stairwell, and the walls will seem to shimmer, turning into translucent white marble for a fraction of a second. I'll hear the giggling of a child from the floor above. Or worse, I'll hear my own voice echoing down from the roof. Just a few more, David. The view is better from here. I never go to the roof. I never look out the windows when the sky turns that specific shade of bruised violet at sunset, because I know that the staircase didn't need me to reach the top to be permanent. It just needed me to touch it. I'm part of the architecture now, a piece of the bridge that's still being built, one step at a time, in the dark corners of the world where people forget to look. I'm safe as long as I stay on the level ground. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I feel my right leg twitch, a phantom motion, as if it's still searching for the 8th step. And I know that one day, I'll stop fighting the gravity of the void. One day, the routine will break, and I'll find myself back in that clearing, looking up at a white marble path that leads to a city with too many moons. And when that day comes, I won't be a ranger anymore. I'll just be another echo in the whispering pines, waiting for the next man with a badge and a heavy heart to find the first step. My name is Silas. I've spent 20 years as a backcountry guide in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. People from the cities think the Ozarks are just rolling hills and fishing spots, but these mountains are old, deceptively old. They have a way of folding in on themselves, creating pockets of limestone and oak where the air stays still for centuries. Out here, there's an unspoken rule among the locals. If the woods go quiet, you stop. If the woods start whistling, you run. It happened in November of 2024. I was leading a private expedition for a photographer named Julian. He was one of those adventure types, obsessed with capturing the raw essence of the wilderness. He wanted to go deep into the Devil's Elbow, a section of the forest that even the most seasoned hunters avoid. It's a place where GPS signals drift and compasses spin like they're trying to point to something deep beneath the earth. We were 3 days into the trek. The autumn air was crisp, smelling of dry oak leaves and wood smoke. Julian was thrilled. He'd spent the afternoon photographing a series of strange, twisted trees that looked like they'd been braided together by a giant. But as the sun began to dip behind the ridges, the forest did something I'd only heard about in hushed whispers over moonshine. It stopped breathing. The squirrels, the cicadas, the constant rustle of the wind, everything vanished in a heartbeat. It was an absolute heavy silence that made the blood roar in my ears. Julian didn't notice at first. He was too busy changing lenses. But I felt the hair on my neck stand up. I felt like a fly trapped in amber. Julian, pack it up. We're moving back to the base camp now, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the void. Just 5 more minutes, Silas. The light is perfect, he replied, not looking up. Then the whistle started. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't the wind. It was a human whistle. 3 notes, perfectly melodic, rising at the end, do, re, mi. It came from the dense thicket of blackberry bushes, about 50 yards to our left. It was loud, clear, and carried a strange metallic resonance. I froze. Julian finally looked up, his face pale. Was that you? No, I whispered, reaching for the bear spray on my belt. Don't move. Don't speak. The whistle came again. Exactly the same. Same pitch, same duration, same haunting 3-note rise. But this time, it came from the right. And then, from behind us, it was moving around the perimeter of our clearing with a speed that no human could match through that thick brush. Maybe it's another hiker, Julian suggested, his voice trembling. There are no hikers out here, Julian. Not this deep. Suddenly, the whistling stopped. A voice drifted out of the shadows. It was a woman's voice, high, sweet, and filled with a desperate kind of urgency. Help me, please! I've twisted my ankle near the creek. Is anyone there? Julian started to move toward the sound. Silas, someone's hurt. I grabbed his arm, my grip like a vice. Stay put. Julian, what are you doing? She sounds terrified. Listen to the voice, Julian, I hissed. Listen to the way she says creak. Julian stopped. He listened. The voice repeated the plea, word for word, with the exact same inflection, the exact same intake of breath at the start. It was a perfect loop. And the word creak, it didn't sound like a person saying it. It sounded like a recording of a creek, the actual babbling of water shaped into the word. Is anyone there? Is anyone there? Is anyone there? The voice began to distort, the sweetness turning into a mechanical grinding sound. And then the 3-note whistle returned. But this time, it was being whistled by 50 different voices at once, all surrounding us in the dark. The sound of 50 voices whistling that same 3-note melody wasn't just loud, it was physical. It felt like a wall of vibration pressing against my eardrums, vibrating the very fluid in my inner ear. Julian was clutching his head, his camera dangling precariously from its strap. He looked at me, his eyes wide, with a primal, animal terror. Silas, we have to help her. Or run. I don't know, he shouted over the cacophony. It's not a her, Julian. It's nothing human. I yelled back. Keep your eyes on me. Do not look into the brush. No matter what you hear, do not look away from my back. I grabbed my heavy-duty survival hatchet with one hand and kept the bear spray in the other. I knew the spray probably wouldn't do much against something that could manipulate sound like a digital editor, but the weight of it in my hand was the only thing keeping me grounded. We began to back away, moving toward the narrow ridge trail that led back to the lower valley. Every time my boot snapped a twig, the whistling would stop for a heartbeat, and then a perfect, synthesized recording of that snap would play back from 3 different directions. It was learning us. It was mapping our movements through sound. Julian, wait up. I dropped my lens cap. The voice came from directly behind Julian. It was my voice. Not just a guess at my voice, but a perfect, high-fidelity replica of my gruff, Ozark-accented tone. It even captured the slight wheeze I get in my chest when the air gets cold. Julian flinched, his body starting to turn. Don't you dare, I barked, grabbing his shoulder and yanking him forward. That's not me. I'm right here in front of you. Keep moving. We reached the edge of the blackberry thicket when the whistling changed. It was no longer a melody. It became a fast, rhythmic chirping like 1,000 crickets, but with the weight of a human scream. And then the brush moved. Something tall, easily 7 or 8 feet, stepped out into the pale moonlight about 20 yards behind us. It didn't have a face, not really. It had a head that looked like a smooth, bleached piece of driftwood, with a vertical slit running from where a forehead should be down to its chest. It didn't have eyes, but it had hundreds of small, vibrating membranes along its neck that looked like the gills of a fish. It didn't run. It vibrated. Its entire body shimmered as it moved, its long, spindly limbs clicking against the limestone floor. As it moved, it emitted a sound that made my stomach turn the sound of my own heartbeat, amplified and slowed down, echoing through the trees. Thump, thump, thump. Silas, it's taking my breath, Julian gasped. He was stumbling now, his face turning a sickly shade of blue. I realized what was happening. The creature wasn't just mimicking sounds, it was using destructive interference. It was producing sound waves that were canceling out the vibrations of Julian's own breathing, literally robbing his lungs of the ability to process air. I didn't think. I reached into my pack and pulled out a high-decibel emergency air horn, the kind used for signaling in deep canyons. "Close your eyes!" I screamed. I pressed the button. Blar! The sound was agonizing. It tore through the silent woods like a physical blade. The creature recoiled, its gill-like membranes fluttering violently as it struggled to process the sudden, chaotic blast of noise. The perfect, rhythmic humming broke. Julian collapsed to his knees, gasping for air as the silence around his chest vanished. "Get up now!" I hauled him to his feet and we sprinted. We didn't follow the trail anymore. I knew the Whistler would be waiting there, setting acoustic traps. I led Julian straight down the scree slope, sliding and tumbling over the sharp rocks toward the dry creek bed. As we scrambled down the slope, the voices returned. But they were no longer trying to trick us. They were screaming. Dozens of versions of my own voice, Julian's voice, and the woman's voice from earlier, all screaming in a discordant, overlapping mess. "Help me. Julian, Silas, stop. Run, wait." It sounded like a choir of the damned, and as we hit the bottom of the creek, I looked back. The creature was perched on the edge of the limestone ledge above us, its driftwood head tilted to the side. It wasn't screaming anymore. It was silent. And then it began to whistle a new tune. It was the song Julian had been humming to himself all afternoon while he took his photos. A song that only Julian and now the woods knew. We reached the old Forest Service cabin at 2 a.m. It was a squat, limestone and cedar structure, half buried in the side of a ridge. It hadn't been officially used since the 70s, but it was solid. Most importantly, it had a heavy, reinforced steel door, a relic from the days when the Park Service was worried about more than just black bears. I practically threw Julian inside and slammed the door, throwing the heavy iron bolt. I didn't turn on a light. In the Ozarks, light just makes you a target in a window frame. I stood there, my back against the cold stone wall, listening to the sound of my own ragged breathing. The cabin was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the one in the woods. This was the silence of a tomb, sterile and cold. "Silas, my ears," Julian whispered. He was curled up on the floor, his hands still over his ears. They won't stop ringing. But the ringing, it's changing. I knelt beside him, my hand on his shoulder. "It's just the adrenaline, Julian. The air horn probably did some temporary damage. Just breathe." "No," he said, his voice trembling. "It's not ringing. It's a rhythm." I pulled my hand away and tilted my head. At first, I heard nothing. Then, I felt it. A faint, rhythmic vibration through the stone walls. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It was too low to be a sound, but it was strong enough to make the dust on the floorboards dance. The creature wasn't whistling anymore. It was using the cabin itself as a resonator. Suddenly, a voice came from right outside the steel door. It wasn't my voice, and it wasn't Julian's. It was the voice of a young girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. "Daddy, I'm cold. Can you let me in? The trees are whispering my name and I don't like it." Julian froze. His eyes went wide, reflecting the faint moonlight coming through the high, barred windows. That sounds like my daughter, Chloe. But she's in Street Lewis. She's with her mother. "Don't listen, Julian," I hissed, my voice a jagged rasp. "It's digging. It's looking for the frequency that breaks you." The voice outside changed. It grew older, more distorted. It started reciting Julian's home address, then his social security number, then the last text message he'd sent his wife. It was as if the creature had intercepted every digital and acoustic signal Julian had ever produced and was now playing it back to him through the steel door. "Delete the photos, Julian," the voice said, now a terrifying mix of a dozen different people. "The woods don't like to be remembered in pixels. Give us the light, and we will give you the silence." Julian scrambled for his camera bag, his movements frantic and clumsy. "I'll give it to them. I'll just give them the SD cards. Maybe they'll go away." "No!" I tackled him, pinning him against the dusty floor. "If you open that door, they won't just take the cards, they'll take the source, they'll take you." The thrumming through the walls grew louder. The limestone blocks began to groan. A glass jar on a shelf across the room shattered, not from a physical blow, but from the sheer resonance of the frequency. The creature was matching the structural frequency of the cabin. It was trying to shake the building apart. I realized then that we couldn't just hide. The Whistler wasn't a predator that would get bored and leave. It was a collector. And we were the newest additions to its library. I reached for my pack and pulled out my emergency flares. I had 3 of them. I looked at Julian, his face pale and eyes sunken. "We have to change the signal," I said. "It's a master of mimicry, but it hates chaos. It hates sounds it can't predict." I grabbed an old, rusted metal bucket from the corner of the cabin and a heavy iron fire poker. "When I open that door, I want you to scream. Not a scream of fear, but a scream of pure, senseless noise. And you don't stop. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, you keep making noise until we hit the trailhead." I stood by the door, my hand on the bolt. Outside, the voices were no longer speaking. They were singing a discordant, multi-layered Gregorian chant that seemed to vibrate the very marrow of my bones. "Ready?" I whispered. Julian nodded, his knuckles white as he gripped his camera. I threw the bolt and kicked the door open. The cold Ozark air rushed into the cabin, smelling of wet limestone and something burnt like the ozone smell after a lightning strike. The creature was there, standing just 10 feet from the threshold. In the raw, unfiltered moonlight, It didn't look like an animal or a man. It looked like a column of vibrating gray mist, shaped into a jagged, spindly silhouette. Its face was a hollow void that seemed to pulse in time with the thrumming of the earth. "Now!" I screamed. Julian let out a raw, jagged cry, a sound of pure, unbridled desperation. I followed suit, slamming the iron poker against the metal bucket with a rhythmic, chaotic violence. Clang, clang, clang. The effect was instantaneous. The creature's gill-like membranes flared and retracted frantically. It wasn't prepared for the chaos. It thrived on patterns, on echoes, on the predictable frequencies of fear. Our senseless noise was like a physical blow to its sensory system. It recoiled, its body blurring at the edges as if it were losing its grip on the physical world. We ran. We didn't head for the trail. We headed straight down the ridge, through the briars and the sharp limestone outcroppings. I kept hitting that bucket, my arm aching, my lungs burning. Julian was right behind me, his voice hoarse, his screams turning into a rhythmic, guttural chant. But as we reached the bottom of the hollow, the whistler recovered. It didn't chase us on the ground. It moved through the canopy, its spindly limbs clicking against the oak branches like a giant insect. And then it stopped trying to mimic our voices. It did something much worse. It mimicked the silence. Suddenly, I couldn't hear the bucket. I couldn't hear Julian's screams. I couldn't even hear the sound of my own boots hitting the leaves. The creature was emitting a null frequency, a sound wave so perfectly out of phase with our world that it created a pocket of absolute terrifying vacuum. I looked back. Julian was stumbling, his mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes rolling back in his head. He was losing his connection to his own senses. "Julian, give us the light." The words didn't come through the air. They came through the vibration in our teeth. Julian stopped. He looked at his camera bag, then at the gray silhouette descending from the trees above him. In a moment of pure, selfless madness, he didn't run. He reached into his bag and pulled out his professional flash unit, the one with the high voltage battery pack. "Silas, close your eyes." His voice cracked through the silence, appearing for just a second as the null wave faltered. He didn't just fire the flash. He short-circuited the capacitor. Boom. A blinding blue-white explosion of light and sound erupted from Julian's hand. It wasn't just a flash, it was an electronic scream. The creature, a being made of frequencies and shadows, wasn't just blinded, it was shattered. The high-pitched whine of the exploding capacitor acted like a sonic grenade. The gray mist of the creature's body dissipated into the fog, accompanied by a sound like 1,000 violins snapping at once. I grabbed Julian's collar and dragged him the rest of the way. We didn't stop until we hit the gravel of the main forest road, where the distant, beautiful hum of a park ranger's truck was finally audible. Julian survived. But he wasn't the same. When we got back to civilization, the doctors said he had a rare form of acoustic aphasia. He can hear just fine, but he can no longer understand human speech. To him, every word, every song, Every conversation sounds like the three-note whistle of the Ozark woods. He spends his days in a quiet room and street, Louis, wearing heavy noise-canceling headphones, staring at the walls. I stayed in the mountains, but I stopped being a guide. I moved to a small cabin near the highway, where the constant, reassuring roar of semi-trucks and traffic keeps the silence at bay. Because I know that the Whistler didn't die that night, it just broke into smaller pieces. Sometimes, late at night, when the traffic dies down and the wind blows from the devil's elbow, I'll hear a faint, metallic vibration in my kitchen sink. Or I'll hear my own voice coming from the empty hallway, whispering a three-note melody I haven't heard in years. And every time I check my voicemail, there's always one message at the bottom of the list. It's 30 seconds of absolute silence, followed by a soft, melodic trill. Do, re, mi. I don't delete the messages anymore. I know that if I do, I'm just giving it another pattern to record. I just let them sit there, a digital echo of a hunter that's still waiting for me to stop making noise. Because in the Ozarks, the woods don't just have ears. They have a memory. And they never, ever forget a tune.
In the upcoming chapter, the heart of a dense forest in rural Pennsylvania, something unnatural was stirring. It wasn't just the wind rustling through the trees or the occasional hoot of an owlet was something far more sinister. Locals whispered about strange lights glowing deep within the woods at night, accompanied by eerie howls that no one could explain. Some claimed they saw shadowy figures moving silently between the trees, while others swore they heard whispers carried on the breeze, voices speaking in tongues unknown to man. Pause. What lurked in those shadows? Was it a creature, a spirit, or perhaps something even more terrifying? Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it there for you? We love knowing who's out there with us and where in the world you're tuning in from. Whether you're starting your day, winding down at night, or somewhere in between, we want to know what your moment looks like. It's also a great way for us to get to know our audience better and maybe even shape future content around your schedules. So go ahead, drop a comment below, and let us know where you are today. We're all ears. The small town of Eldridge Hollow had always been known for its picturesque landscapes and tight-knit community. Nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and children played safely in the streets after sunset. But over the past few years, something had changed. Families began disappearing without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and haunted memories. At first, people thought it was just bad luck, a series of unfortunate accidents, but as the disappearances continued, fear spread like wildfire through the town. It started subtly. A farmer would find his livestock torn apart, their bodies left drained of blood. Then came the stories of hunters venturing too far into the woods, never returning. The townsfolk tried to rationalize these events, attributing them to bears or cougars roaming the area. Yet, no predator in nature could explain the chilling details: claw marks larger than any animal's, footprints that defied logic, and an unsettling silence that followed every incident. One evening, under the pale light of a full moon, a group of brave souls decided to confront the darkness head-on. Armed with flashlights and makeshift weapons, they ventured into the forest, determined to uncover the truth. They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves beneath them. As they delved deeper, the air grew colder, and an oppressive weight settled upon their chests. The once familiar woods now felt alien, as if the very trees were watching them. Hours passed, and nothing seemed amiss. Just when hope began to flicker, the group stumbled upon an abandoned cabin hidden among the pines. Its windows were shattered, and vines snaked through the cracks in its walls. Inside, they discovered remnants of a lifelong forgotten rusty tools, tattered clothing, and photographs scattered across the floor. But one item stood out above the rest: a journal, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping through its entries, they read accounts of sightings, descriptions of monstrous beings lurking in the shadows, and warnings scrawled in frantic handwriting. Whoever lived here had met a gruesome end, but not before documenting the horror that consumed them. As dawn approached, the group returned to the village, shaken but resolved. They shared the contents of the journal with anyone willing to listen, hoping to rally support for another expedition. This time, they prepared traps, baiting them with raw meat laced with sedatives. If whatever roamed the woods was indeed responsible for the disappearances, they planned to capture either, at least understand it. Weeks turned into months, and still, nothing happened. The forest remained eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. Just when doubt began to creep in, the unthinkable occurred. One morning, the group found one of their traps triggered, the bait gone, and a trail of massive paw prints leading away from the site. Following the tracks, they eventually reached a clearing bathed in an unnatural glow. There, illuminated by an ethereal light, stood a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. Towering at least 10 feet tall, it resembled a wolf, yet bore features distinctly human-like. Its eyes burned with an intelligence both calculating and merciless. Paralyzed with fear, the group watched as the beast stared back at them, unblinking. For what felt like an eternity, neither side moved. Finally, the creature let out a guttural roar that shook the ground beneath their feet, then disappeared into the underbrush as quickly as it had appeared. The group retreated, hearts pounding and minds racing. They had seen the source of the terror plaguing Eldridge Hollow, but understanding it was another matter entirely. Word of the encounter spread rapidly, drawing attention from researchers, paranormal investigators, and thrill-seekers alike. Among them was Dr. Eleanor Carter, a renowned anthropologist specializing in cryptozoology. She arrived in Eldridge Hollow armed with cutting-edge technology and a determination to unravel the mystery. Her findings revealed startling connections between the creature and ancient Native American folklore, specifically tales of the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit said to embody insatiable hunger and greed. Dr. Carter hypothesized that the creature might not be entirely natural, but rather a manifestation of human fears and desires given form by some unknown force. This theory gained traction when locals recounted seeing the creature moments before losing loved ones to tragic accidents or acts of violence. Could the Wendigo feed not just on flesh but on emotions? The idea sent shivers down everyone's spines. Despite her efforts, Dr. Carter couldn't fully explain the phenomenon. What she did manage to achieve, however, was raising awareness about the importance of respecting nature and acknowledging the mysteries that lie beyond human comprehension. While the creature hasn't been spotted since, the people of Eldridge Hollow remain vigilant, knowing that somewhere in the depths of the forest, the Wendigo waits, watching. And so, the question remains, is the Wendigo a relic of the past, a figment of imagination brought to life, or a warning of humanity's darker impulses? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did the creature truly exist, or was it merely a product of collective paranoia? Whatever the case may be, one thing is certain: Eldridge Hollow will never be the same again. If you enjoyed this story, consider sharing it with a friend who loves mysteries as much as you do. And don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling tales delivered straight to your feed. Until next time, stay curious and remember the world is full of wonders, some brighter than others. In the upcoming chapter, after uncovering the horrifying truth behind the Ugandan village plagued by the monstrous crocodile, and delving into the chilling mystery of the cannibalistic fate of the stranded Arctic explorers, you might think humanity has seen its fair share of terrors. But as history shows, there are always darker corners, left unexplored places where nature itself seems to conspire against us. Speaking of which, let me tell you about another eerie phenomenon that baffled scientists and terrified locals alike: the vanishing lights of Skinwalker Ranch. You may have heard whispers of strange happenings in remote areas across the United States: UFO sightings, cattle mutilations, and mysterious glowing orbs darting through the night sky. One such place became infamous for these phenomena. A desolate stretch of land nestled deep within the Uinta Basin of Utah, known locally as Skinwalker Ranch. This isn't just any ranch. It's a gateway to something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The year was 1996 when Robert Bigelow, a wealthy businessman with an interest in paranormal research, purchased this isolated property after hearing countless reports from local farmers who claimed their livestock were being killed in bizarre ways. Animals would be found dead without visible wounds, drained of blood, or even levitated off the ground before dropping lifeless. At first, many dismissed these accounts as mere superstition or exaggeration, but then came the lights. Locals described them as living entities, shifting colors between red, blue, and green, moving erratically across the landscape at impossible speeds. Some swore they saw metallic objects hovering silently above the fields, while others reported shadowy figures lurking near the boundaries of the ranch. What made things worse was the sheer frequency of these events. It wasn't a one-time occurrence, it happened almost nightly. Intrigued yet skeptical, Bigelow assembled a team of investigators equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance technology. Cameras, motion detectors, and audio recorders were installed throughout the property, hoping to capture definitive proof of whoever was responsible for the chaos. For months, nothing substantial appeared on tape, just static-filled nights and restless winds sweeping through the canyon. But patience paid off. One fateful evening in late October, all sensors went haywire simultaneously. Security footage revealed a cluster of luminous orbs descending from the heavens, weaving gracefully around trees and boulders before vanishing abruptly into thin air. Simultaneously, thermal imaging picked up heat signatures resembling humanoid shapes standing motionless at the edge of the woods. When the team ventured out to investigate, they discovered scorch marks etched into the earth, along with peculiar geometric patterns drawn in the dirt using unknown methods. What followed next shook everyone to their core. Over the following weeks, equipment began malfunctioning inexplicably. Radios crackled with unintelligible voices speaking in foreign tongues. Cameras captured distorted images of elongated figures melting into shadows, and even the animals seemed to sense danger, refusing to graze near certain sections of the land. As fear spread among the crew, some began questioning whether they had stumbled upon not just a hotspot for alien activity, but perhaps a portal connecting our world to another dimension. Then came the final twist. During a routine inspection of the data logs, analysts noticed recurring timestamps linked to every major event recorded on the ranch. Each incident occurred precisely at 3:33 a.m. time, steeped in folklore as the hour when spirits roam freely and barriers between worlds grow thin. Coincidence? Or evidence of forces beyond human comprehension? To this day, no definitive explanation exists for what happened at Skinwalker Ranch. Was it extraterrestrial visitors testing humanity's limits? A supernatural entity asserting dominance over sacred grounds? Or maybe both? Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains certain. There are places on Earth where reality bends under pressure, exposing cracks we dare not explore. So, what do you believe? Are the lights of Skinwalker Ranch echoes of ancient powers awakening or signals from civilizations light years away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the scariest mysteries aren't those we solve, they're the ones we leave unanswered. In the upcoming chapter, after uncovering the horrifying truth behind the Ugandan village plagued by the monstrous crocodile, and delving into the chilling mystery of the cannibalistic fate of the stranded Arctic explorers, you might think humanity has seen its fair share of terrors. But what if the greatest horrors don't come from beasts or desperate circumstances? What if they originate within our own minds? Nature itself often serves as both predator and protector, but sometimes the most terrifying threats are invisible, hidden deep in the recesses of human psychology. Speaking of which, let me tell you about another eerie phenomenon that left an entire town questioning reality itself. The house that feeds on fear. In a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled between rolling hills and dense forests lies a house unlike any other. To passers-by, it appears normal a two-story structure with peeling paint and overgrown ivy climbing up its walls. However, those who have lived nearby for generations whisper tales of strange occurrences linked to this unassuming building. Over the years, countless families have moved in, only to leave under mysterious circumstances or not leave at all. The story begins decades ago when the first family took residence. They were a typical household, parents working hard to provide stability, children playing happily in the yard. At first, life seemed perfect. But then came the whispers. Not audible sounds, but thoughts that crept into their minds during moments of solitude. Thoughts like, "You're not good enough," or "They would be better off without you." These voices grew louder over time, planting seeds of doubt and despair. One evening, after months of enduring these intrusive thoughts, one member of the family snapped. A violent argument erupted, ending in tragedy. Neighbors later reported hearing screams, followed by an unsettling silence. When authorities arrived, they found the house empty, with no signs of struggle or departure. It was as though the family had vanished into thin air. Years passed, and new occupants tried their luck, hoping the past was merely coincidence. Yet each family met a similar fate. Some claimed they saw fleeting shadows moving through the corners of their eyes. Others described doors creaking open on their own, or cold spots forming in random areas of the house. Whatever the manifestation, the result was always the same: paranoia spiraling out of control until someone broke. Psychologists eventually became involved, attempting to explain the phenomena through theories of mass hysteria or environmental triggers affecting mental health. However, no concrete evidence could account for the consistent pattern of madness and disappearance tied to the house. Some suggested it might have been built over ancient burial grounds, disturbing spirits long buried beneath the earth. Others proposed electromagnetic anomalies causing neurological disturbances in those exposed. Then came a young couple seeking refuge from the chaos of city life. Eager to start fresh, they purchased the house despite warnings from locals. At first, everything seemed fine. The husband threw himself into renovating the property, while the wife tended to the garden. Their daughter, a curious child of 7, explored every corner of the house, giggling as she played hide-and-seek with imaginary friends. But soon, things began to change. The wife noticed her reflection in mirrors acting independently of her movements. The husband heard footsteps upstairs late at night, even though he was the only one home. And their daughter, well, she started speaking in a voice far older than her years, claiming her friends wanted them to stay forever. One fateful night, the couple decided to confront whatever force haunted their home. Armed with flashlights and determination, they searched room by room, calling out for answers. Instead of finding clarity, they stumbled upon something far more disturbing. In the attic, hidden beneath layers of dust and cobwebs, they discovered journals belonging to previous residents. Each entry detailed escalating feelings of fear, guilt, and worthlessness, culminating in cryptic final lines like, "It knows everything about us." Terrified yet unwilling to flee, the couple stayed one last night, hoping to gather more evidence. As dawn approached, they realized they weren't alone. Shadows danced across walls, whispering secrets they couldn't remember upon waking. Objects moved inexplicably, and the temperature dropped drastically. By morning, neither the couple nor their daughter was ever seen again. To this day, locals avoid mentioning the house aloud, fearing it might hear them. Those brave enough to venture close claim the whispers grow louder with each step, promising freedom while simultaneously warning of doom. Is it truly cursed? Or is it simply a manifestation of humanity's darkest fears given form? Whatever the answer may be, one thing remains certain: stepping foot inside means losing yourself forever. So, what do you believe? Are the whispers real, or are they merely echoes of our subconscious fears brought to life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters aren't lurking in the dark, they're hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to listen.